Hello and welcome to another video. This is the fourth episode of the story in which the council decides to secretly train a young blonde following the Kyubi attack. 10 years after the attack, the Anbu joined the ranks while wearing a Kitsune mask. Now, 12 years later, the Anbu wishes to face his own Genin team and remove the mask. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, was preparing for a difficult conversation with Naruto. As he rummaged through his desk for his favorite tobacco blend, he reflected on the stress of the day and the particular situation involving Naruto's team. The tin of tobacco was finally found, and with his pipe now lit, Hiruzen contemplated how Naruto would react to the mission he was about to give him. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Recognizing the chakra on the other side, he called Naruto in. Naruto, cautious as ever, entered the room still wearing his Anbu mask. Hiruzen motioned for him to remove it and sealed the room from any outside interference. "I have a mission for you," Hiruzen began, knowing full well Naruto would not be pleased. The younger ninja's face immediately soured as he realized what was being asked of him. "What?" Naruto exclaimed. "I thought I was done with that. I have a team now." Hiruzen remained calm, allowing Naruto's outburst to run its course. He knew Naruto needed to express his frustration. But after a few moments, Hiruzen cut him off sharply, asserting his authority. "Naruto!" Hiruzen slammed his fist on the desk. The outburst caught Naruto's attention, and he reluctantly sat down. Hiruzen pulled out a scroll bearing the Fire Daimyo's seal and placed it in front of Naruto. "The daimyo?" Naruto asked, confused. Hiruzen explained that the daimyo had specifically requested Naruto's team for a C-rank mission, a delivery to the capital. Despite Naruto's protests about his team not being ready, Hiruzen made it clear that they had no choice. Refusing a direct request from the daimyo could have significant political repercussions, not only for Naruto but for the entire village. "I can't refuse?" Naruto asked, clearly frustrated. "No," Hiruzen responded firmly. He explained the importance of maintaining a good relationship with the daimyo, especially since Naruto had aspirations of becoming Hokage. The daimyo's favor could be essential in achieving that goal. After some contemplation, Naruto reluctantly accepted the mission, though he insisted that he would carefully choose his team for the task. Before Naruto left, Hiruzen offered one final piece of advice: remember your training while you're in the capital. You're stepping into a dangerous game. Saying the wrong thing to the wrong person can end badly. Naruto nodded, mask back on, and left the room. As the door closed, Hiruzen turned to look out over the village, wishing he could have shielded Naruto from this mission, but knowing there was no way around it without risking political fallout. The Fire Daimyo's involvement made everything more complicated, and the Hokage could only hope Naruto was prepared for what lay ahead. Naruto stood in the training field, surrounded by the quiet hum of his own shadow clones, their forms flickering in and out of existence as they practiced fire, earth, and water jutsu. His brow furrowed in concentration as he watched them intently, trying to work out strategies for his team. 100 clones by the river were discussing ideas to help Shikamaru, while others brainstormed ways to integrate a Kimichi-style earth jutsu. Overseeing it all, Naruto considered the complexities of the martial arts forms they were practicing, wondering how to blend the principles of the gentle fist with the more rooted movements of Bagwazang. Lost in thought, Naruto sensed his Genin students approaching before he even saw them. He smiled as their wide-eyed expressions took in the sheer number of clones scattered around the field. It was their first time seeing him summon so many, and their amazement was clear. "Okay," he called out, drawing the attention of his clones. They immediately started to dispel themselves, returning their gathered knowledge to Naruto in bursts of memory. By the time he reached his students, the clones were all gone. "Good morning," Naruto greeted them warmly. "Good morning, sensei," Hinata responded softly. Shikamaru yawned, while Choji offered a grin, already munching on a snack. Shikamaru's curious eyes flicked towards Naruto as he processed what he had just witnessed. "Did they just call you boss?" he asked, his tone baffled. Naruto shrugged casually. "Yeah, they do that. They're basically me, but with their own thoughts and perspectives." To demonstrate, he summoned a clone beside him, which immediately chimed in, confirming Naruto's explanation with a playful contradiction. The two versions of Naruto argued briefly, showcasing the odd independence of the clones, before Naruto dispelled the one beside him with a bemused punch. The team looked on, confused but intrigued. Choji was the first to break the silence, commenting between bites of chips, "That's really bizarre." Naruto sighed, knowing there were more serious matters to address. He turned to Choji first. "Sorry about leaving so suddenly last night. I didn't want to, but the old man needed to talk to me about a mission." That got Shikamaru's attention. "A mission for us?" "Yeah," Naruto replied, his tone growing somber. This wasn't a mission he was particularly looking forward to discussing. "Our team has been requested for a delivery run." "Requested?" Shikamaru's sharp mind immediately latched onto the oddity. "Why request our team specifically?" "Because of me." Naruto's voice grew heavier as he explained. "Now that I'm no longer with the Anbu, our team can be requested for missions. This one, it's from the daimyo." The reaction was instant. Hinata's eyes widened in shock, Shikamaru frowned in confusion, and Choji nearly dropped his snack. "The daimyo?" they echoed. Naruto nodded. "We've been asked to report to Otosanachi to deliver something." Shikamaru, ever the strategist, seemed unsettled. "Wait, a mission for the daimyo? What rank is this mission?" Naruto hesitated before answering. "It's C rank." The words hung in the air like a weight. Shikamaru scowled, frustration and confusion twisting his expression, while both Hinata and Choji went pale. They weren't ready for a C rank. They all knew that. "We're not ready for a C rank," Shikamaru muttered, his frustration barely contained. "You're not," Naruto admitted bluntly. "I tried to refuse the mission, but because it's the daimyo, we can't." "But why us?" Hinata asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Me," Naruto repeated. "The daimyo has been interested in me for a while, back when I was in Anbu. Now that he knows my name, he can request me, and us." Shikamaru seemed to grasp the implications. "So, what, this is just a way to get you to the capital?" Naruto thought about it. It's possible. The mission could just be something simple, like one of those D-rank grocery deliveries we get here. Shikamaru's response was deadpan. "Seriously? We deliver groceries?" Naruto shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Hey, I told you that those mundane D-ranks serve a purpose. But listen, we don't know what the delivery is, and just being outside the village can be dangerous. We're going to take this seriously." Despite their unease, his words reassured the team, though the tension was still palpable. With a sad smile hidden beneath his mask, Naruto gave them their orders. "Go home and pack everything you need for a week-long trip, just like we practiced in the academy. Meet me at the main gate in an hour." Meanwhile, Hinata sat on the edge of her bed, staring down at the neatly organized supplies in front of her. Kunai, shuriken, food rations, a sleeping roll, everything she could need for the mission lay ready. Her hands were sweating, and she could feel her heart racing in her chest. A C-rank mission, and for the daimyo, no less. She knew her family wouldn't take the news well. The Hyuga would be more worried about the reputation of their clan than her own safety. Yet, as nervous as she was, Hinata wanted to prove herself, to her team, to her father, and to herself. She still had time before she needed to leave, but instead of checking her gear again, she decided to face what awaited her at home. Hinata sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the red fabric of the torn scarf, memories of that snowy day flooding her mind. The cruel words of the bully still echoed in her ears, but even louder was the voice of the blonde boy who had come to her rescue, his conviction ringing through the years, "I'm the future Hokage." He had stood up for her when no one else had, his sheer determination and kindness breaking through her fear and sadness. Back then, Hinata had felt utterly alone, ostracized within her own clan, especially after the loss of her mother. Her cousin Niji had turned cold, the Hyuga elders treated her as a failure, and even her father had become distant. Yet this stranger, this boy with golden hair and whisker-like marks, had been her light in the snow. He had given her the courage to keep going, even when the weight of her family's expectations felt unbearable. Hinata lifted the scarf to her face, inhaling the faint scent it still carried, a reminder of that day. She had kept it hidden all these years, afraid her family would see it as a symbol of weakness. But to her, it was the opposite. It was a token of hope, a reminder that someone believed in her, even if they didn't know her name. That boy's confidence had planted a seed in her heart, a desire to become stronger, to prove herself, not only to her family but to herself as well. Her thoughts drifted back to the present. A C-rank mission for the daimyo. She had faced battles in training, endured the cold stares of her clan, but this was real. This mission was a step into the unknown, and her father's reaction worried her. Would he be concerned for her safety, or would he merely be ashamed of her for being chosen for such a task? Hinata knew the Hyuga clan already considered her a failure, unworthy of being their heiress. But then, she remembered that boy's words, "I don't need a reason to help someone. I'm gonna keep getting stronger and help anyone I can." With a deep breath, Hinata closed the box, setting the scarf aside gently. She had more strength in her now than she did back then. She wasn't that frightened little girl anymore, hiding from the world. She was a shinobi now. She had a team. She had friends. And despite her fears, she knew she couldn't let them down. Hinata gathered her pack, checking one last time that everything was in place. Kunai, shuriken, first aid, rations, all of it was prepared. She wiped her damp palms on her pants, trying to calm her nerves. She still had time before she needed to leave, but there was no point in stalling any longer. With a resolute nod, she threw the scarf over her shoulders, hidden beneath her jacket, and headed out the door. Whatever awaited them on this mission, she would face it. Not because of the weight of her clan's expectations, but because of the strength she had found within herself, and the encouragement of a boy who had once said he would be Hokage. As Hinata stood outside her father's office, her heart pounded in her chest. The encounter with Junko had stirred some unexpected feelings, curiosity, admiration, and a hint of jealousy, but now, facing her father, those emotions shifted to a mix of fear and hope. She had been dreading this moment, unsure of how her father would react to her mission for the daimyo. Would he be proud? Disappointed? Worried about how her performance might reflect on the Hyuga clan? She knocked softly, and when her father's voice called her in, she steeled herself for whatever was to come. Hayashi's initial smile had warmed her heart, but it quickly faded into concern when he noticed her packed bag. His confusion was clear, and Hinata could feel the sweat on her palms as she explained the mission. His scowl, as he paced back and forth, worried her even more. Would he disapprove of her taking on such a responsibility so soon after becoming a genin? But when he stopped and walked over to her, bending down to meet her at eye level, his expression softened in a way she had rarely seen before. His hands rested gently on her shoulders, and his words were calm but full of an emotion that Hinata hadn't expected, faith. He trusted her. He believed in her. "Listen to Naruto and always stick with your team," he said softly, the concern evident in his eyes. "I have faith you can do it. But please, be careful." Hinata's breath caught in her throat as she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. This warmth, this care, it wasn't the strict, cold Hayashi she had grown up with. Since she had become a genin, their relationship had been changing, slowly but surely, and each moment like this made her believe in the possibility of real closeness between them. She nodded, her voice caught in her chest, and wrapped her arms around him in a brief but heartfelt hug. After she stepped back, she bowed deeply, her heart swelling with the emotion of this rare, tender exchange. "I will return soon, Ota-sama." "I know you will," he replied with quiet confidence, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer before she turned and left his office. As she made her way toward the village gate to meet her team, her mind buzzed with all the weight of the day's events, the strange encounter with Junko, the conversation with her father, and the looming mission for the daimyo. But through it all, the image of that torn red scarf stayed with her. The boy who had saved her, who had vanished without a trace, had unknowingly given her a strength she still carried with her. Now, with her father's faith supporting her and the memory of that boy's kindness in her heart, Hinata felt a quiet resolve settle within her. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with courage. After all, she wasn't that scared little girl anymore. She was a kunoichi now, and she would prove it, not just to her father or her clan, but to herself. Choji arrived at the village gate, feeling a bit sheepish as he greeted his teammates. Hinata stood quietly, clutching the straps of her pack with both hands, while Shikamaru lay on the ground, staring up at the sky with his usual look of boredom. "Sorry," Choji called out, though he wasn't late. His mother had put up quite the fuss when she found out about the C-rank mission, and he had barely escaped with his supplies, let alone his dignity. He chuckled, rubbing his stomach nervously as he thought about the frantic scene at home. As soon as Choji approached, Naruto appeared behind them with a suddenness that nearly made Hinata jump. "Good. Everyone's on time," he said, scanning the three genin with a satisfied nod. After explaining the mission's more relaxed pace, Choji felt a wave of relief. He'd been worried Naruto would push them too hard to reach Otosan Uchi in record time. But then, their sensei's voice took on a gleeful edge. "Of course, that just means we have more time to train as we walk." Shikamaru groaned loudly, dragging his hands down his face in exasperation. "Are you serious? Not only do we have to deal with this troublesome mission, but now we have to train too?" Naruto feigned a hurt look, muttering that the training wasn't that crazy, but the way he kicked at the dirt made it clear the comment had landed. Choji almost laughed, seeing their sensei act so human, even with that mysterious Kitsune mask on. After a second of pouting, Naruto dug into his pack and started handing out their training tools. Shikamaru sighed heavily as he caught the familiar candle they'd used the day before. "You know I had trouble with this while standing still, right? Now you want me to do it while walking?" "It's good practice," Naruto replied with a shrug, tossing Hinata a smaller bowl than the one she had trained with earlier. Choji, still curious about what his task would be, soon found himself holding a jar filled with dirt, or, as Naruto insisted, soil. "It's just like yesterday, Choji," Naruto explained. "Except now, instead of compacting and loosening the earth beneath your feet, you'll be working with it inside the jar." Choji nodded slowly, remembering the chakra exercises they had struggled through before. He wasn't anywhere near mastering it, but at least the concept was starting to make sense. His attention drifted when Naruto mentioned something about codes and formations, piquing Shikamaru's interest as well. As they left the village and began their journey down the main road, Naruto casually instructed them to swap positions, moving Hinata to the middle. Choji, wondering if it was because she was a girl or due to her bloodline, hesitated to ask but followed the order. When Naruto asked, "Do you know who the most targeted member of a squad is?" Choji thought for sure it would be the weakest, and the way Hinata's shoulders slumped suggested she thought the same. But Naruto quickly corrected them. "Actually, it's the sensor or the medic," Naruto explained. "Hinata's Byakugan makes her the most valuable target to well-informed enemies. A good sensor can ruin an ambush, and a skilled medic can prolong a battle you thought you'd won. Hinata seemed taken aback by the praise Naruto gave her, his recognition of her strength in close combat catching both her and Choji by surprise. She hadn't seen herself as a strong fighter, but Naruto's confidence in her stirred something inside. She straightened her back, focusing more intently on the exercise as she activated her Byakugan. For the next hour, the group walked in silence, each genin grappling with the challenge of training while walking. Choji found the task frustrating, balancing the concentration of his clan's techniques with Naruto's instructions to relax and spread his chakra outward. He frowned, wondering how Naruto always seemed to know when he was struggling, even without turning to look. Finally, Shikamaru broke the silence, tired of the difficult training and seeking distraction. "Didn't you say something about codes, sensei?" Naruto chuckled knowingly. "Ah, yes. Codes. You all know the basic ones from the academy, but it's smart to develop your own as a team. Secret communication can be crucial in the field." Shikamaru nodded, intrigued by the strategic potential. "What kind of codes do you mean?" "Identification, 4-1. You need a way to know if your teammate is really who they say they are," Naruto replied. "You could also use codes to identify threats or give silent instructions in battle. The trick is to make it subtle, so your enemies don't even realize you're communicating." "How would we do that?" Hinata asked, her soft voice tinged with curiosity. Naruto's laughter echoed in the quiet road. I couldn't get my Anbu squad to agree, but you three? You don't have a choice." Choji chuckled between bites of his chips, feeling a bit more at ease. Despite the daunting mission ahead, with Naruto leading them and Shikamaru already thinking ahead, Choji felt like they might actually be ready for whatever awaited them at the daimyo's palace. As they continued down the path, Naruto led the way with that mischievous laugh still lingering in the air. Choji couldn't help but grin as he chewed, finding comfort in the fact that even on such a serious mission, their sensei managed to keep things light. Shikamaru, now fully intrigued by the idea of secret codes, seemed lost in thought, likely coming up with countless strategies and possibilities for their new system. Hinata, her eyes glowing faintly with the activation of her Byakugan, remained focused, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to balance both the chakra exercise and her heightened awareness. "All right," Naruto began, his voice breaking the relative quiet of their journey. "Let's start simple. We'll come up with a few quick codes, something easy to remember that doesn't stand out. Let's say we need to identify each other in case we get separated and we're not sure if the person we're meeting is really who they claim to be. How do we do that?" Shikamaru asked, his tone now more engaged, eager to dive into the tactical side of things. "We can't just say, 'Are you really Shikamaru?' in the middle of a fight." "Exactly," Naruto agreed. "So, we come up with something casual, something that could pass for normal conversation but has a hidden meaning. For example, let's say I ask you, 'What do you think about the weather?' That's the signal for you to identify yourself." Choji blinked. "The weather?" Naruto nodded. "Yep. And then, you respond with something we agree on. Something simple, like, 'It's clear skies ahead.' But the trick is, you give me the wrong answer on purpose. So, if it's a sunny day, you say, 'It looks like it might rain.' That way, I know it's really you." Choji scratched his head. "But if someone overhears us, won't they think it's strange?" "That's the beauty of it," Naruto said with a grin. "No one pays attention to small talk like that. It's just a conversation to anyone else." Shikamaru nodded, clearly already thinking about ways to improve the system. "Okay, so the key is to keep it simple but flexible. We don't want to overcomplicate things or use phrases that sound too rehearsed." "Exactly," Naruto confirmed. "But the weather is just one example. We could use anything, like favorite foods, hobbies, or even old jokes." The idea is to make it so normal that no one suspects a thing. Choji perked up at the mention of food. We could ask each other what our favorite snack is, he said with enthusiasm, imagining himself casually mentioning barbecue during a mission. Naruto laughed, clapping him on the back. Exactly, Choji. You'd be surprised how useful it is to have these little signals in the field. Sometimes, the smallest things can save your life. As they walked, Naruto continued to guide them through more examples, letting each genin contribute their own ideas. Shikamaru suggested a system of hand signals for when they needed to communicate in silence, while Hinata shyly offered the idea of using specific gestures combined with her Byakugan to signal threats they couldn't yet see. After a while, Naruto stopped and turned to face them, his tone becoming more serious. Alright, we've got a good start. But keep in mind, codes like these are only useful if we work as a team. Trust is everything. You'll have to trust each other to follow through and pay attention, especially when things get dangerous. Choji felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach at Naruto's words. The reality of the mission, protecting a delivery for the daimyo, was starting to sink in. Despite the training and the planning, they were about to step into the unknown, and the stakes were higher than anything they had faced before. Don't worry, Naruto added, sensing the tension. I'm here to make sure you're ready. And trust me, you're more prepared than you think. Choji looked over at Shikamaru and Hinata. He could see the worry in their faces too, but there was also determination. They weren't alone. They had each other, and Naruto. And somehow, that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, they could handle whatever came their way. The road stretched on before them, and as they walked, the landscape began to shift, the trees growing denser and the mountains in the distance becoming more prominent. The sky overhead was clear and bright, but Choji couldn't help but wonder what challenges awaited them once they reached Otosunachi. Naruto glanced back at the three of them, his mask obscuring his expression, but his voice was full of confidence. Let's pick up the pace a little. We'll stop before nightfall, and tomorrow we'll really start to see how far you've come. With that, they pressed on. The sun slowly dipping lower in the sky as they moved steadily toward the capital, the weight of their mission hanging silently over them. But for now, they focused on each step, each breath, knowing that as long as they stayed together, they'd face whatever came next, no matter how dangerous. The group continued their steady pace along the road, their earlier conversation about codes and tactics simmering in their minds. Choji, in particular, felt a quiet determination take root as he adjusted his pack and munched on another chip. It wasn't just the weight of the mission that had him focused, it was the sense of responsibility toward his team. Even though Shikamaru was the strategist and Hinata had her Byakugan, Choji knew he had his own strengths to bring to the table. He was strong, loyal, and ready to protect his friends, just as his father had taught him. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road, Naruto led them through a wooded area, his steps sure and confident. The dense trees surrounding them blocked most of the remaining light, making the path ahead feel more secluded. Choji felt a shiver of unease, though he wasn't sure if it was the darkening sky or the gravity of their mission. We'll camp here tonight, Naruto finally announced, coming to a halt in a small clearing. It's a good spot, not too far from the main road, but hidden enough to keep us out of sight. Choji exhaled, relieved to stop walking. His legs were tired from the day's journey, and he could see that both Hinata and Shikamaru were also eager to rest. As they began setting up camp, Choji watched Naruto move effortlessly through the motions, quickly lighting a small fire and directing the genin to arrange their sleeping bags. It struck Choji how easy Naruto made everything look, whether it was leading the team, training, or preparing for the night. There was something about their sensei that put him at ease, even in moments of uncertainty. After a while, the fire crackled warmly in the center of their camp, and the four of them sat around it, the glow of the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces. The air was cooler now, but the warmth from the fire and the comforting smell of wood smoke filled the space between them. Choji pulled out some snacks from his pack, offering them to the group as they settled in for the night. "So," Shikamaru said, leaning back on his hands and staring into the fire, "what do you think we should expect tomorrow?" Naruto looked up from tending the fire, his masked face illuminated by the orange glow. "Hard to say for sure. The road to Otosan-uchi is patrolled, but there's always the chance of encountering bandits or rogue shinobi. C-rank missions aren't usually high risk, but anything outside the village has its dangers." Choji shifted uneasily. He had heard about bandits before, but the idea of rogue shinobi sent a chill through him. "Do you think we'll have to fight?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. Naruto's eyes lingered on Choji for a moment before he answered, his tone calm but serious. "Maybe. But remember, we're not out here to pick fights. Our job is to deliver the package and protect it. If we can avoid combat, that's what we'll do. But if we have no choice, then we'll deal with it together." Choji nodded, his grip tightening on the bag of chips in his lap. The idea of a real fight, one where lives might be on the line, made his stomach churn. He had trained for moments like this, but the thought of actually using his strength against someone who meant him harm was a lot to process. He glanced over at Shikamaru, who was deep in thought, and Hinata, who seemed to be fidgeting slightly, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Naruto stood up and stretched, breaking the tension. "All right, we should get some rest. I'll take first watch. We'll rotate through the night." The three genin nodded, grateful for the chance to rest, even if sleep felt far away. As Choji settled into his sleeping bag, his mind buzzed with thoughts of tomorrow. He lay on his back, staring up at the canopy of trees above them, the occasional rustle of leaves and crackle of the fire filling the quiet night. Beside him, Shikamaru muttered something under his breath, likely running through different strategies and plans for the journey ahead. Choji smiled faintly. No matter how lazy his friend pretended to be, Shikamaru was always thinking, always a few steps ahead. And Hinata, though quiet, had her own strengths. Choji had seen her resolve grow in the short time they'd been a team, and he had no doubt that when the time came, she would rise to the challenge. He closed his eyes, trying to push aside the nerves that twisted in his stomach. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and whatever dangers they faced, Choji knew that they had each other. As he drifted off to sleep, the last thing he heard was Naruto's calm breathing as he stood watch over the team, the fire casting a soft glow over the camp. It was a small comfort, but one that helped Choji fall into a fitful, but necessary, sleep. The road to Otosan-uchi stretched ahead of them, full of unknowns, but they would face it together, come what may. The next morning came quietly, the sun rising slowly over the horizon, casting a soft light through the canopy of trees. Choji blinked awake, the scent of dew and pine in the air as he rubbed his eyes. The camp was peaceful, but there was a sense of quiet tension as the group prepared to continue their journey. He looked over to see Shikamaru yawning as he sat up, his hair sticking out in all directions, while Hinata quietly folded her sleeping bag with delicate precision. Naruto, who had taken the final watch, was already packed and standing near the road, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings from behind his Kitsune mask. Despite the mask, Choji could sense that Naruto was alert, his posture stiff and ready for anything. They had a long way to go before they reached Otosan-uchi, and though Naruto had assured them the main route was relatively safe, Choji couldn't shake the feeling that something might happen. "Breakfast, anyone?" Choji asked, pulling out some bread and dried meats from his pack, trying to lighten the mood. Shikamaru raised a hand lazily, accepting the offering, while Hinata gave a shy nod. As they ate, Naruto approached them. "We've got another full day of walking ahead," he said, his tone casual but firm. "But today, I want to push you a little harder. We'll keep practicing chakra control, and I want you all to work on being aware of your surroundings. This route may be patrolled, but it doesn't mean we can let our guard down. Always stay sharp. Shikamaru sighed dramatically, muttering something about how troublesome it all was, but he stood up, stretching with a groan. Yeah, I get it. More walking and training. Choji chuckled, popping another piece of dried meat into his mouth. Better than sprinting the whole way, he said. At least Naruto-sensei is giving us some breaks. Hinata smiled softly at their banter, though her eyes still held a quiet focus, clearly already thinking ahead to the challenges that lay before them. Her Byakugan had been active much of the previous day, scanning the area around them as they walked, and Choji knew it must have been exhausting. But she never complained, always ready to do what was needed for the team. Once camp was packed up, the group set off again, the road stretching before them as they resumed their steady pace. Naruto led the way, as usual, his movements fluid and sure. The three genin followed close behind, each of them focused on the exercises Naruto had assigned. Choji held the jar of soil in his hands, trying to sense the earth inside it with his chakra. It was difficult, his family's techniques focused on expanding chakra internally, not spreading it outward. Still, he was determined to improve, even if it was slow going. Relax your focus, Choji, Naruto called over his shoulder, his voice calm but instructive. Let the chakra flow naturally. Don't force it. Choji exhaled, trying to take the advice to heart. He loosened his grip on the jar, letting the weight of it settle in his hands as he focused on sending his chakra into the soil. Bit by bit, he could feel the earth inside respond, shifting slightly under his command. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Hinata, meanwhile, had activated her Byakugan again, the pale veins around her eyes standing out as she scanned the area ahead. She was still working with the smaller bowl Naruto had given her, balancing water as she walked. Her concentration was intense, but every now and then, Choji caught her glancing up to check the road ahead, her eyes always scanning, always aware. Shikamaru, on the other hand, had given up on the candle exercise for the moment, choosing instead to focus on their surroundings with his usual analytical gaze. He walked with his hands in his pockets, his face set in a thoughtful frown as he observed the trees and terrain around them. You never know, he muttered to Choji at one point, when something might pop up. By midday, the sun hung high in the sky, and Naruto called for a short break. The group stopped by a small stream, its clear water bubbling softly as it wound through the trees. Choji gratefully sat down by the bank, dipping his hands into the cool water to splash his face. It was a relief to rest, even if only for a few minutes. Shikamaru stretched out on the grass, letting out a satisfied groan. Finally, he said, shading his eyes with one hand as he gazed up at the sky. Troublesome mission or not, at least it's a nice day. Naruto sat nearby, observing them in silence, his eyes still sharp and alert. Don't get too comfortable, he warned lightly. Break's over in 10. Choji chuckled softly to himself as he leaned back on his hands, glancing over at his teammates. Even with the growing tension of their mission, the camaraderie between them made everything seem more manageable. They had become a team quickly, each of them fitting into their own role, and Choji could feel how much they were already starting to rely on each other. As they resumed walking, the sun began its slow descent, casting a golden light through the trees. The path had grown quieter, the sounds of nature enveloping them as they moved deeper into the countryside. Choji's muscles ached from the long journey, but he forced himself to focus on his chakra exercise, determined not to fall behind. Suddenly, Hinata stopped in her tracks, her Byakugan eyes widening. "S-sensei," she whispered urgently. "There's something ahead." Naruto immediately halted, his body tense as he turned to face her. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sharp but calm. 3, no, 4 figures, she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're hiding by the road about a mile ahead." Choji felt his stomach drop. Bandits? Rogue shinobi? He glanced at Shikamaru, whose eyes narrowed in thought, already calculating their options. Naruto gave a brief nod, his mask tilting slightly as he considered the situation. "All right," he said quietly. "Everyone, stay close. We don't know who they are or what they want, but we'll approach carefully. Remember what we talked about, codes, formations, and stick together." Choji felt his heart pounding in his chest as they moved forward, the peaceful walk suddenly taking on a much more dangerous tone. His hands clenched around the jar of soil, trying to suppress the anxiety rising within him. This was it, the moment they had trained for. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had no choice now. As they neared the spot Hinata had indicated, Naruto raised a hand, signaling for them to stop. The air felt thick with tension, the trees casting long shadows across the road. For a moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, a figure leapt from the trees ahead, landing in front of them with a menacing grin. 3 more figures followed, each one armed and clearly prepared for a fight. Well, the first one sneered, his voice low and mocking. "What do we have here? A group of little shinobi on a mission?" Choji swallowed hard, stepping closer to Shikamaru and Hinata. His heart raced, but he tried to remember Naruto's words. "Stick together. Trust each other." Naruto stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We don't want any trouble," he said. "But if you're looking for a fight, you're going to regret it." The leader of the group laughed, his eyes glinting with malice. "We'll see about that." Choji's hands trembled slightly as he prepared himself. This was no longer training. This was real. But as he glanced at his teammates, Shikamaru's calm focus, Hinata's quiet strength, he knew they could handle it. Together, they would face whatever came next. Choza and Shikaku sat in heavy silence, the weight of their shared guilt settling between them like an unspoken presence. The reality of how they had unintentionally distanced Naruto from something as simple as a family meal hit hard, more than either of them had expected. They had been there for him as mentors, trainers, and protectors, but had they truly been there for him as family? Choza sighed, leaning back in the office chair, his large hand running through his hair. "I thought last night would be a simple dinner," he said quietly, "just some food and conversation." But the way Naruto looked when he admitted he'd never had that. It was like I'd punched him in the gut without realizing it. Shikaku leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his sharp mind unusually quiet, contemplating the years they had spent with Naruto. He had always prided himself on his ability to see things from every angle, to plan for every possibility. But this? This was something he hadn't accounted for. How could we have missed this? "He's always been so independent," Shikaku murmured, his voice low. "Naruto never complained. He never asked for more. We assumed he was fine on his own because he seemed fine. But maybe we were just seeing what we wanted to see." Choza nodded solemnly. "He's been strong, sure. But maybe we mistook that strength for something else. Maybe we thought he didn't need the same things our own kids needed. And that was a mistake," Shikaku admitted. "We should have known better. Minato and Kushina, if they were here, they would have made sure he had all the family support he needed. And we, as their friends, should have done more to give that to him." There was a bitter edge to the silence that followed, a silent acknowledgement of their shortcomings. Choza clenched his fists, his earlier hunger completely forgotten. He thought about Choji, how he had been there for every important moment in his son's life, every meal, every celebration, every small joy that came with raising a child. And then he thought about Naruto, going through life without those simple, cherished moments. "He's a remarkable kid," Shikaku said after a long pause, breaking the silence. "He's been through so much, and yet, he turned out better than most of us could have imagined. That's all thanks to his own willpower, not anything we did. We trained him, sure, but we didn't give him the one thing he deserved most, family." Choza looked at his old friend, the weight of their responsibilities settling heavily on his broad shoulders. So, what do we do now? He asked quietly. How do we make this right? Shikaku exhaled deeply, standing up and walking over to the small window in his office. The light outside was fading, casting long shadows across the Hokage tower. We start by being there for him when it matters most. We can't undo the past, but we can make sure that from now on, he knows he's not alone. Choza nodded, standing up as well. Yeah. Naruto deserves better than we've given him. And it's about time we did something about it. The two men exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They had a lot to make up for, but they would make sure Naruto knew he had more than just mentors. He had people who cared about him, who wanted to see him happy, not just as a warrior, but as a person. First things first, Shikaku said, reaching for his coat. Let's go get that sake. Choza grinned, the heaviness in his chest lightening just a little. I could use a drink. As they walked out of the office together, the sound of their footsteps echoing down the quiet hallway, Choza couldn't help but think of his son and the journey ahead of them. He trusted Choji and his team, just as Shikaku trusted Shikamaru and Naruto. But as a father, the worry never really went away. We'll drink for them too, Choza said as they exited the tower. For our kids. And for Naruto. Shikaku smiled faintly. For them. And for what we owe them. Together, they made their way into the village, knowing that there was more to their role than just guiding the next generation of shinobi. It was time to show Naruto, and each other, that they could be more than just mentors. They could be the family he never had. Naruto found himself enjoying the slower pace of this mission, something that stood in stark contrast to the usual frantic sprints through the forest. It was a rare kind of calm, allowing him and his team the luxury of moving at a leisurely speed, working on their skills without the pressure of danger looming overhead. As they practiced their chakra control by climbing trees, Naruto couldn't help but feel satisfied with their progress. Shikamaru was sitting at the base of his tree, completely spent from the exercise, while Choji and Hinata had done well, their markings on the trees indicating their respective heights, Hinata, naturally, leading with her precision thanks to her clan's rigorous chakra training. After a while, Naruto called it off, pulling their attention to the small fire where he was preparing fish. The team collapsed around the flames, enjoying a well-deserved rest. Shikamaru groaned his usual complaint, "This is troublesome," but even he was eating the fish gratefully, while Hinata quietly massaged the bridge of her nose, her eyes strained from overusing the Byakugan. Naruto noticed her discomfort right away, offering a few gentle words of caution about not pushing herself too hard. Hinata, in her usual timid way, nodded, feeling both reassured and slightly disappointed in herself, but Naruto was quick to remind her that rest was just as important as the training itself. His words seemed to lift her spirits as she took the fish from him, her mood brightening with each bite. The conversation soon drifted to their destination, Otosunachi, the capital of the Land of Fire. Shikamaru's curiosity got the better of him as he asked what kind of place it was, sparking a discussion about the politics and military structure outside their hidden village. Naruto, with a mix of authority and ease, explained the complex balance between the daimyo's army and the shinobi forces. It was new information to most of them, particularly Choji and Shikamaru, who had assumed that shinobi handled most of the country's conflicts. The idea of a large standing army, led by formidable samurai, was a revelation to them. Naruto detailed how the shinobi, despite their immense power, were kept out of large-scale wars between nations to avoid devastating consequences. The sheer destruction someone like the first Hokage could unleash was enough to terrify anyone, and Naruto's Genin team paled at the thought. Hinata, ever the curious one, asked more about the samurai, wondering how they compared to shinobi. Naruto explained their strict code of honor and their ability to channel chakra, which made them formidable warriors, even if they didn't use ninjutsu. He described the legendary general of the army, Minamoto Kenzo, whose strength was said to rival that of a Kage. The scale of the army itself, tens of thousands strong, was another eye-opener for the young Genin. They exchanged uneasy glances, realizing just how vast and complex the world outside their village truly was. Despite the heaviness of the topic, Naruto managed to ease their nerves, reminding them that they were still far from having to worry about such things. They were Genin, after all, still learning and growing. There would be time to think about these larger responsibilities later. For now, their mission was simple, and they could be grateful for that. The mood in the camp lightened as they finished their meal and prepared to continue their journey. As they packed up and refilled their water at the river, Naruto couldn't help but notice Hinata struggling with her chakra exercise, spilling water as she tried to control it. He frowned slightly, thinking of a better way to train her. Though hesitant at first, he realized there was a more advanced technique he could teach her, one usually reserved for more experienced shinobi. But Hinata's gentle fist training had given her enough control that he was confident she could handle it. With that in mind, Naruto rummaged through his pack, pulling out the tools he would need for her new training. His decision, though, carried a certain weight, as if he were holding back some deeper reason for not wanting to introduce this technique just yet. But with Hinata's dedication, he knew she was ready, even if he felt a slight apprehension about what this new step might mean for her. The team, now rested and curious, watched in anticipation as Naruto prepared to teach them something new, a quiet sense of excitement rippling through the camp. This mission, once seeming so calm and uneventful, was now opening doors to deeper lessons and new challenges, with Naruto guiding them forward one careful step at a time. As Naruto turned around, holding 2 water balloons in his hands, the Genin looked on with a mix of curiosity and confusion. He approached Hinata first, placing one balloon gently into her hands before taking a seat across from her. "All right, Hinata," he said, his voice calm but instructive, "watch carefully." Hinata instinctively began to weave the hand signs to activate her Byakugan, but Naruto stopped her. "No Byakugan," he said firmly, catching her off guard. Hinata blinked in surprise. "Why?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly with uncertainty. She was used to using her Byakugan to analyze exercises, relying on it as her primary tool to figure out the mechanics behind any technique. Naruto shook his head, his masked face unreadable, but his tone was encouraging. "I don't want you to figure this out too fast. I want you to feel your way through this. Find the answer for yourself." His gaze held steady on her, urging her to try. Hinata felt a knot of anxiety form in her chest. For someone like her, who always leaned on precision and visual clarity, this was unfamiliar territory. Yet, she gathered her nerves and nodded. Naruto held out the balloon in front of him, his chakra flowing subtly into it. Slowly, the balloon started to warp and deform, small ripples forming on its surface until, with a small pop, it burst, spilling water over his hand. "The goal," Naruto explained as he wiped his hand on his pants, "is to use your chakra to manipulate the water inside the balloon until it pops. But," he gave her a knowing look, "don't puncture it using gentle fist techniques or try to control the water as an element. Just focus on moving the water with your chakra." Hinata stared down at her own water balloon. This was unlike any exercise she had done before. Her usual inclination was to control her chakra flow with sharp precision, but here, she had to maintain a gentler touch. Taking a deep breath, she concentrated, channeling chakra into her palm. Feeling it seep into the balloon. The water inside sloshed slightly, but nothing substantial happened. On her second attempt, the balloon wobbled awkwardly in her hand. She had pushed too hard, and the water nearly spilled out. Her heart sank momentarily, but she took a deep breath, refocused, and tried again. This time, the water inside the balloon swirled ever so slightly but settled back into place, no closer to popping. It was frustrating. She felt like she was moving in circles, getting nowhere. Still, she persisted. But before she could dive back into the exercise, Naruto approached her again, this time holding a bowl of rice with fish laid over it. "Have some dinner, Hinata," he said with a gentle smile, breaking her concentration. Hinata blinked up at him, realizing for the first time that the rest of the team was already eating. She blushed, embarrassed that she had been so focused on her training that she hadn't even noticed. "Tea, thank you, sensei," she murmured, setting the balloon aside and taking the bowl from him. "You're welcome," Naruto said, plopping down beside her, his own bowl in hand. "You all did great today. Take it easy for the rest of the night." As Hinata quietly ate her dinner, she glanced at her teammates. Shikamaru seemed to be making progress with his exercise, lighting small sparks on the wick of his candle. Choji, though still struggling, had at least managed to insert his chakra into the soil jar Naruto had given him earlier. Hinata's eyes lingered on the balloon beside her, feeling a small surge of frustration. This new exercise wasn't something she could immediately figure out like usual, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Still, she reminded herself that she wasn't the only one facing challenges. Her teammates had their own struggles, too. Perhaps this was how they always felt, having to figure things out without the advantage of a bloodline limit. It was a humbling thought, and for the first time, Hinata found herself wondering what it must be like to live without the Byakugan's gift. That night, as they packed up camp and prepared to resume their journey the next day, the team's dynamics began to shift. Naruto, in his own awkward way, had tried to engage them in conversation during dinner, asking simple questions to break the ice. Initially, there had been a lot of silence and uncertainty, but Shikamaru eventually stepped in to keep the conversation going, acting as the intermediary between Naruto and the others. Food became their common ground, and to Naruto's relief, both Choji and Hinata started talking more openly. Choji, naturally, loved talking about food, and Hinata, though still shy, shared that she enjoyed cooking. By the end of the night, Naruto had even suggested they rotate cooking duties on their next mission. Days passed, and the team approached Otosanachi. Shikamaru found himself yawning as they walked along the busy road leading to the capital's gates. The massive stone walls that loomed before them were impressive, easily rivaling those of Konoha. The road was bustling with merchants, traders, and travelers, all heading towards the city's grand entrance. Naruto led the way, his usual upbeat attitude masking any weariness from the long journey. As they stood in line with the other travelers, Naruto explained to the team the sheer size of Otosanachi. "It's about 15 times the size of our village," he said, gesturing toward the sprawling walls. "The city is divided into 3 zones, the outer city, the inner city, and the daimyo's court at the center. Each zone has its own districts, 6 in the outer city, 6 in the inner, and 1 for the court." The scale of it all left Choji whistling in awe. "Wow, that's huge," he remarked. "What's the difference between the outer and inner city?" Naruto explained that the outer city was primarily commercial, filled with markets and factories, while the inner city housed samurai clans, theaters, and guilds. It was an impressive place, rich in history and bustling with life. As they approached the gate, they were intercepted by a group of soldiers, dressed in red armor and stern-faced. Naruto handed over a scroll with the daimyo's seal, explaining their mission. The soldiers seemed to expect them, ushering them into the city and explaining that they were to be escorted to the palace. "Escort?" Naruto asked, surprised. He hadn't anticipated such formalities. Typically, they would head to the Konoha outpost within the city before reporting for a mission. Soon enough, a group of samurai on horseback appeared, led by a fierce-looking woman in golden armor. "I am Akoto Kobe of the Lion Clan," she announced, her voice firm and commanding. She was to escort them directly to the palace. Naruto bowed slightly, offering a respectful introduction for himself and the genin. As they boarded the carriage that had been brought for them, Shikamaru couldn't help but feel uneasy. "This is strange, right?" he asked quietly, looking over at Naruto. Naruto, arms crossed, nodded after a brief pause. Yes, he admitted. This isn't how things usually go. It's likely that we were specifically summoned here for something more than just a routine mission. Hinata, always thoughtful, asked nervously, what should we do? Nothing, Naruto shrugged, his voice calm. We proceed as planned. Be respectful, don't insult anyone, and everything should be fine. He offered a small smile, but there was a note of seriousness in his voice. As they rode through the city, taking in its grand scale and elegant architecture, Shikamaru couldn't help but think back on everything that had transpired. There was more to this mission than met the eye, but for now, all they could do was trust in Naruto's leadership and adapt to whatever came next. And so, with the towering palace looming in the distance, they moved forward, ready for the unknown. As Naruto and his team stepped out of the carriage and laid eyes on the man waiting at the base of the grand stone steps, Naruto's voice took on a tone of awe. That's Minamoto Kenzo. He muttered, almost to himself. Shikamaru's eyes widened at the name. The general of the army? His sharp mind immediately began turning, calculating the implications. This was no ordinary reception. His muttered observation, rolling out the red carpet, aren't they? Earned a quiet, agreeing nod from Naruto. Yeah. Naruto replied, his voice low but calm. Stay behind me and remember to remain polite at all times. The genin nodded silently. Shikamaru, Choji, and Hinata followed Naruto's lead as he approached the imposing figure standing at the steps. Minamoto Kenzo was every bit as intimidating as his reputation suggested. His tall, muscular frame carried an air of authority that demanded respect. His long black hair, streaked with gray, was tied into a loose top knot, and the armor he wore, deep jade green with gold accents, was both elegant and formidable. He radiated a calm, commanding presence, his dark eyes sharp as they surveyed the approaching shinobi. Welcome to the daimyo's court, Kenzo greeted them with a voice as strong as his presence. I am Minamoto Kenzo. Naruto bowed respectfully, his movements fluid and controlled. Kenzo Dano, he greeted, his tone formal. You honor us with your welcome. I wasn't expecting the general of the army to greet us. I'm sure, Kenzo replied, his eyes never leaving Naruto. There was a knowing smirk on his face. But then again, I was curious to meet you for myself. Shikamaru kept his expression neutral, though he could see Choji's eyes widen in amazement beside him. The weight of this encounter was not lost on them. Here stood one of the most powerful men in the land of fire, and he seemed keenly interested in their sensei. Naruto, ever composed, responded smoothly, I hope you're not disappointed in what you see. Your stature certainly lives up to your reputation, Kenzo Dano. Kenzo rubbed his chin thoughtfully before letting out a genuine laugh, a deep and unexpected sound that broke the tension. Ha! Does it? I wonder. His eyes flickered to the genin for a moment. You're handling this fairly well, and your genin, he glanced over the three young ninjas, they aren't bad either. Naruto turned his head slightly toward them, his voice carrying a note of pride. Yes. I am lucky to have such a talented group. From the tone, Shikamaru could guess their sensei was smiling under his mask, and despite their best efforts, all three genin felt their faces warm at the praise. Kenzo chuckled. I wonder if that mask is hiding a blush as well, he teased lightly before turning on his heel. Come, follow me. As they began to climb the steps behind the general, Shikamaru couldn't shake the feeling that Kenzo was sizing Naruto up in some way, evaluating him carefully. There was something casual yet intense about the man, much like his own father, Shikaku. Kenzo carried himself with the ease of someone who knew far more than he let on, as if this entire meeting was a game he was expertly maneuvering. The group reached the top of the stairs, but instead of heading towards the grand doors of the court, Kenzo led them off to the side, toward a secluded garden area surrounded by tall trees and ornate stone walls. The soft trickle of a nearby fountain filled the quiet air as they entered. Shikamaru's brow furrowed. Shouldn't we be going into the court? Or some sort of meeting room? He wondered, but he kept his questions to himself. As they walked, Kenzo struck up a conversation. Have you visited the capital before? He asked, his voice casual but probing. I've only been here a few times, Naruto answered. Usually as a resting place while traveling for missions. I see, Kenzo hummed thoughtfully. What do you think of the capital? Naruto's response was diplomatic. I haven't had much time to explore, but all my experiences here have been positive. Kenzo's eyes gleamed with pride. Good to hear. It's unfortunate that you haven't had more time to explore. Perhaps in the future, I could show you some of my favorite spots. That would be an honor, but surely a man in your position doesn't have much time to spare, Naruto replied, his tone light but subtly probing. Shikamaru caught the undercurrent immediately. Sensei's fishing for information, he thought. It was clear that Naruto was feeling out the situation, politely drawing Kenzo into revealing more than just pleasantries. Of course, Kenzo said smoothly, his voice rich with amusement. But I always make time for things that interest me. Naruto tilted his head slightly. I'm not sure I'm worthy of such attention. Kenzo gave a soft, knowing laugh, the kind that suggested he knew far more than he was letting on. Oh, I wouldn't say that. Anyone who has his attention is certainly worth looking into. There was a brief pause, and Naruto's voice, though still calm, carried a subtle shift. I'm not sure I should have the attention of the daimyo. Kenzo's laughter was deep and unrestrained this time, echoing through the quiet garden. Who said it was him? He said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Shikamaru's eyes widened, his mind racing. If it's not the daimyo, he thought, but before he could piece it all together, Kenzo stopped at the entrance to a small, intricately designed tea pavilion nestled in the garden. Kenzo turned to face them, his expression softening slightly. There are always those who take an interest in the exceptional, he said cryptically, his gaze lingering on Naruto for a moment before shifting to the Genin. And Konoha has always produced exceptional individuals. Naruto, ever composed, gave a small nod. Thank you for the compliment, Kenzo-dano. With that, Kenzo gestured toward the pavilion. Please, sit. Tea will be brought shortly. As they took their seats, Shikamaru couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more at play here than they realized. Kenzo was clearly playing a long game, and Naruto, though calm on the surface, was keenly aware of it. Shikamaru exchanged a quick glance with his teammates, all of them sharing the same unspoken thought, just what had they walked into? Hiruzen Sarutobi barely had time to look up before his son, Asuma, strode into the Hokage's office without so much as a knock. The Anbu stationed around the room tensed, always ready for action, but immediately relaxed when they recognized the intruder, who was looking particularly rough after what must have been a long mission. Hey, Pops, Asuma greeted, his tone lacking any of the respect usually shown to the Hokage. I just got back from a mission and Irika tells me I had to rush here. Couldn't even take a shower. What's so urgent? Hiruzen suppressed a sigh as the Anbu quietly left the room at his unspoken signal. Asuma stiffened slightly at this. It wasn't often that his father dismissed the Anbu when he entered, which meant whatever they were about to discuss had a seriousness even he hadn't anticipated. Hiruzen slowly rose from his chair and turned toward the portraits of his successors, his gaze lingering on the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. There was a heaviness in his movements, an old burden weighing on his mind. I need your counsel, Hiruzen finally said, his voice quieter than usual. Asuma raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. That's a first, he muttered, though there was no real heat in his words. About what? Hiruzen didn't turn around immediately, but his eyes were sharp as he spoke. Naruto's team has been summoned by the daimyo. They're already in Otosan-uchi, the capital. He let the words hang in the air, allowing their weight to settle. Asuma's eyes widened slightly, his casual demeanor dropping. "Oh," he said, his voice subdued. "Well, I can see why that'd worry you." Hiruzen shot his son an exasperated look. "Seriously?" he thought, but he simply nodded. "Indeed. What concerns me most is why Naruto's team was summoned at all. It's highly unusual, even for a mission of this nature." Asuma, now looking more serious, slumped down onto the couch, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it with a flick of his thumb. He took a long drag, exhaling slowly. "The daimyo?" he asked, his brows furrowed. "You've met him, father. You think this was his idea?" Hiruzen's eyebrows lifted. "What do you mean?" "The orders came directly from the daimyo's office. His seal, his signature, everything is in order." Asuma blew out a cloud of smoke, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, sure, but there's something you might not know about the whole Guardian Ninja incident, something that ties into all this." Hiruzen's gaze sharpened. Asuma rarely spoke of his time as one of the 12 Guardian Ninja, and Hiruzen had always sensed that the experience had left deep scars on his son. The civil war that had broken out between the Guardians, and the eventual purge of half their number, had left Asuma looking older and wearier than he had before. "I'm listening," Hiruzen said, lighting his own pipe, the familiar act calming his nerves. Asuma leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment before speaking. "You know why those 6 Guardians were so confident they could take control, right? Why they believed they could usurp the Hokage's authority and put the village under the daimyo's direct rule." Hiruzen took a deep puff of his pipe, his eyes narrowing. "I assumed it was their ambition and their desire for power." Asuma shook his head, tapping the ash off his cigarette. "It wasn't just ambition, Pops. They had backing. They had a plan." Hiruzen's eyes locked onto Asuma, his grip on the pipe tightening slightly. "Go on." Asuma took another drag before answering. "The daimyo's heir. That's what they were banking on. The crown prince." Hiruzen froze for a second, his mind racing. The daimyo's son? The boy had always been kept out of the public eye, his existence more rumor than fact. Hiruzen had heard little about him over the years, and he had always assumed the daimyo was simply overprotective of his child. But now? The heir? Hiruzen repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. Asuma nodded. "Yeah. Doji Makoto. He's not what you'd expect. They kept him hidden for a reason. And now that he's of age, things are moving behind the scenes." His eyes met Hiruzen's, and for the first time in years, Hiruzen saw a flicker of real concern in his son's eyes. "And I don't think Naruto and his team were summoned just for some run-of-the-mill mission, Pops." Far from the village, Naruto and his Genin team were following Minamoto Kenzo through the palace grounds, their curiosity growing with each passing moment. The capital city had already overwhelmed them with its size and grandeur, but this, being personally escorted by the general of the army, was something else entirely. They approached a small, unassuming one-story building, nestled amidst the grander architecture of the inner palace. It looked like a modest dojo compared to the ornate buildings that surrounded it. Yet, despite its simplicity, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that there was something significant about this place. "Here we are," Kenzo said with a knowing smile. Naruto's senses, finely honed from years of training, were conflicted. His ability to detect negative emotions had become second nature to him, but in this moment, despite the strangeness of the situation, he sensed nothing malicious. Kenzo's demeanor was relaxed, his smile genuine. Yet something in Naruto's gut told him to remain cautious. The wooden doors of the building slid open, revealing a young man in his mid-20s standing in the doorway. His tan skin and striking brown eyes immediately drew the attention of everyone present. His long black hair was tied back in a ponytail, though loose bangs framed his handsome face. He was dressed in black hakama pants and a richly embroidered blue kimono with an intricate white pattern. His katana and wakizashi were tucked neatly into his obi, and his entire presence radiated elegance and warmth. Naruto, ever alert, immediately tried to sense any negativity, but once again, nothing. The man was happy, almost jubilant to see them, as if they were old friends. Kenzo gave a respectful bow to the man and then, in a voice that carried a weight far greater than his usual casual tone, said, "May I present the Crown Prince? Doji Makoto." Naruto's breath caught in his throat. The Crown Prince of the Land of Fire. So this is why we're here. Makoto stepped forward, his warm smile widening as he looked at Naruto and his Genin team. "It's an honor to meet you all," he said, his voice rich and charismatic. "I've been looking forward to this." Shikamaru's sharp eyes widened ever so slightly. This isn't just a mission, he realized. There's something much bigger going on here. Naruto, too, felt the shift in the air. He bowed slightly, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "The honor is ours, Crown Prince." Makoto's smile remained, but his eyes gleamed with something deeper. "I've heard so much about you, Naruto Uzumaki. I've been eager to meet you in person." Naruto's heart skipped a beat. Just what kind of attention have I attracted? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more content. Support the original author by clicking their profile link in the pinned comment of the first video of this series. They deserve the love. Want early access and exclusive content? Join my Patreon community, link below. Your support fuels these videos. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next video. Stay entertained, stay safe.